major threats to biodiversity by humans can be summed up with the acronym HIPCO. H for habitat destruction, fragmentation, loss of some kind. I for the infect of invasive species. P for the population growth of humanity and the use of resources that entails. P for pollution. C for climate change. And O for overexploitation, such as overfishing. Habitat destruction occurs when humans convert complex natural ecosystems into simplified systems that do not support as many species, such as farmland or urban areas. Tropical rainforests in particular are threatened by habitat destruction. Currently about 1% of the rainforest biome is lost each year due to logging or for clearing for agricultural use. Since the 18th century, much of the wetland habitats in the United States has been destroyed because these areas were previously viewed as waste areas that were not useful to humans. Habitat fragmentation occurs when a barrier forms that prevents an organism from accessing its entire home range. Causes could be the building of a road, the harvesting of a forest, urban development. We could build corridors or land bridges to connect areas, which might help limit this problem. But habitat destruction is the loss of a habitat, whereas habitat fragmentation is breaking it up into smaller pieces. Fragmented habitats cannot support as much life and therefore is still a threat to biodiversity. Anytime a non-native species is introduced to a new environment, whether accidentally or on purpose, there are consequences to that introduction. When there is a negative impact on the environment, we refer to these species as invasive species. Invasive species can have a major impact. They can change an entire habitat by occupying the same niche as native species. That in turn causes an unnatural competition among organisms. Environmental pressure then increases as the carrying capacity of the ecosystem is reached, and that causes a problem. Native species that are beneficial to the environment can be crowded out or replaced. Many well-known examples, zebra mussel we can see on the shopping cart in the middle, the Africanized honeybee, gypsy moth, kudzu, the Asian carp, all sorts of different organisms that have caused a loss of biodiversity due to competition with native species. Most governments have programs and regulations that prevent and manage invasive species. Prevention is always going to be our first line of defense. But if prevention fails, then we go into some sort of quick response. We have three major ways to respond. The physical control could be some sort of barrier or physically removing the species. A chemical control could be an herbicide or a pesticide. A biological control could be a living organism that would actually eat the invasive species. Or it could maybe spread a disease to the invasive species. There have been many situations, however, when some of these control mechanisms, especially the biological, have caused other problems and in turn become invasive themselves. Population worldwide has grown exponentially, and based on current trends, we predict that the Earth's population will continue to grow at a rapid rate. The natural slowing of population growth as it nears Earth's carrying capacity is going to be due to an increase in death rate and a decrease in the birth rate as a result of things like water shortages, pollution, food resources, land use problems, imbalances in the biogeochemical cycles. But as human populations increase, there's loss of habitat and habitat fragmentation, there is increased use of resources, which is causing other problems, and that is going to reduce biodiversity into areas wherever humans choose to expand to. So there can be far-reaching effects due to an overabundance of humans in an area. Pollution is another major threat to the biodiversity of the planet because it introduces contaminants into the natural environment that causes change. Pollution could be things like carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases, human waste, industrial agricultural chemicals. It could be thermal pollution, it could be light pollution, it could be noise pollution. Pollution itself is classified into one of two categories, a point source and a non-point source pollution. Point source, I can actually, okay, it started here. It started at this particular point. It came from this point. Non-point sources are widespread. So say carbon dioxide and its connection to the automobiles on the planet, it's a non-point source pollution. A particular problem with pollution is pollutants that are long-lasting within living systems. In order for biomagnification or bioaccumulation to occur, the pollutant must enter the food chain. Typically, the pollutant dissolves into fat and becomes concentrated within living organisms, and it increases within the environment within that first organism. It accumulates, and then as other organisms up the trophic level eat them, it magnifies its effect. So while there is very little in this case DDT, in the water, you're getting 10 million times the dosage increasing as you go from the water to the bird. So even very small concentrations in the environment can find their way into organisms in high doses enough to cause problems. If the pollutant is short-lived or broken down before it can become dangerous. If it's not mobile, it will stay in one place and is unlikely to spread. But pollutants that dissolve in fats can bioaccumulate and biomagnify. Climate change is an argued one, but we need to understand that the greenhouse effect is a normal warming effect. Without the greenhouse effect, the planet would be a frozen ball. The problem is that the gases in the atmosphere that hold on to the heat that's reflected from the surface of the planet, such as CO2, NO2, NO3, the NOxes, methane, and a other variety of things, they absorb heat. But if you put too much of those into the atmosphere, then you're going to hold on to too much heat, and you're going to end up with global warming, where the temperatures of the planet are increasing on a global scale. That can have effects on the range of species, migratory patterns, all sorts of different things, including increased storms, as we're beginning to see in today's society. Overharvesting occurs when a resource is consumed at an unsustainable rate. This occurs on land in the form of overhunting, excessive logging, which results in deforestation, poor soil conservation in agriculture, and the illegal wildlife trade. About 25% of the world's fish are now overfished to the point where they cannot be harvested sustainably, so we're dealing with a major decrease in fish stocks. We are over-harvesting the water in our ground, and we're noticing subsidence and sinkholes as the aquifers deplete. A number of endangered species, the background extinction rate is increasing drastically. The background extinction rate should be roughly 1 in 1 million species going extinct every year, and we're working somewhere between 1 in 1,000 and 1 in 100 going extinct at the current levels of use. Endangered species, for example, here the Philippine eagle, the Chinese river dolphin, and the Javan rhinoceros are all at this point extinct or near extinct. There is a path to trying to deal with some of these human effects. We've seen how HIPCO is damaging biodiversity, and we understand, I hope, that biodiversity is important not just for the value that it holds inherently, but also for the services it provides humanity. Ecological restoration is the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that has been degraded, damaged, or destroyed by active human intervention and action. It is the process of repairing damage caused by humans to the biodiversity and the dynamics of natural ecosystems. It is an intentional activity that initiates or accelerates the recovery of an ecosystem with respect to its health, its integrity, and its sustainability. So you're going to need to do things like controlling erosion, replanting trees, reintroducing native species and removing the invasive one, revegetating, restoring, rebuilding habitat. And we need to work together to do this, to restore what has been damaged, to try to recover what we have destroyed. Only by working together will humanity be able to do this. But we do see that a small motivated minority of people can have lasting and effective change. So we need to work together to make that happen, to restore the ecology of our world.